นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอปารุธาเดสังอมัตถสทาวราเยโสตวันทาปมุญชันทุสตังI wish to welcome you here on this lovely day. And this is champagne or stretching the rules a bit. It says elderflower. So the subject, the title of the talk is Being at Peace in a World of Conflicts, and so this probably interests everyone here in this room because the world is, if any way to describe the world, it's about conflicts. And so it's we have the hope that we'll solve all the conflicts and have peace, the idea of peace, but recognize the reality that we have to bear with in this realm that we're living in, which is like this. You have a body, you have to, that grows up, gets old and dies, gets sick, gets sensitive in a changing environment, different seasons. As you can see, it's autumn now, and then winter, and then there's conflicts everywhere within one's mind and externally. So this is the nature of the conditioned realm, and I think it's very important to really admit this, recognize what we have to deal with as human individuals, because we think we oftentimes take the conflicts into personal a way, or always blame it on somebody else, or a different political party, or different group of people, or different country. And so if we begin to get perspective on the actual realities of what it is to be a human being living on planet Earth, then we begin to not expect peace and happiness and resolution of conflicts in any permanent, decisive way in this realm. And so the Buddha pointed to the way of looking inward rather than trying to resolve the endless succession of conflicts that we experience both personally and nationally and whatever, in any form, any degree of pleasure, pain, and hope and disappointment and despair. So I found this very, very helpful, because my background is one of, being very idealistic about, after the Second World War, we wanted peace. I remember, now we can have peace now that we've solved the problems in Germany and Japan, and then, of course, it was Russia, Soviet Union. And now it's Islamic terrorism, and on like this. So we can see that this is just the nature of this realm. Its very nature is conflicted because each one of us has our own karma to bear with. We're not just stamped kind of tin soldiers from a assembly line. Each one of us has to deal with the way we are, our own particular temperament, karma, or different conditions, attitudes, in various degrees that we individually experience them. Whether you're in the same family or in different families, same race or nationality or same gender or different, conflict is the very nature of this realm. So and why I'm doing this or reflecting this way, just so once we kind of get that perspective, we can accept that. We're not asking it to be otherwise anymore. We're not expecting the present government to solve the conflicts or the United Nations or whatever. And we hope for the Messiah to come and straighten out, clean up the mess we've made, or the Maitreya. I always wished, that Maitreya Buddha, that period would start very soon. Because we made such a mess of everything. And we need, Maitreya to come at this time and clean it up. And wouldn't that would be very nice, wouldn't it? And it's just, God or some really super powerful, benevolent, compassionate figure come in and clean up the mess we've made. But in the Buddhist terms, at this time, is that we have this opportunity to do it in here, in ourselves. And so this is the whole point of vipassana meditation or insight meditation practice, because this we can do. It's within our potential and our ability to resolve conflict in our own mind. In regards to the ones externally, sometimes we can resolve or deal with them in skillful ways, but rarely does it ever, it's still one conflict and then another, both in families or personal relationships or in where you work, your office, your profession, and then the neighbors, and then and the society, and then there's always the French and the Germans, and the Americans. So where none of us have the power to resolve these conflicts. And then, of course, these peace proposals for Israel or the Palestinians, this is, trying to resolve that conflict in some kind of reasonable way seems almost impossible. But recognize within your own mind that it is possible to resolve it internally rather than wait for it all to be resolved externally or wait for the Messiah or Maitreya Buddha. So this is, and then the Buddha laid down very clear teachings on how to do this. So it's not just a kind of hope or some kind of fantasy or some ideal, but he laid down a way of teaching that was very practical, and how to deal with, say, suffering, one's own experience of dis-ease, unhappiness, or internal conflicts. Like we all suffer from the conflict between our intellect and our emotions. So many people have, we know all the right things from the intellect, how things should be done, and what's right and what's wrong, and what's allowed and what isn't. That figured out already. How a government should be, how a father should be, how a mother should be, and so forth. But the realities of existence are, even though we know all these shoulds and ideals, and we have certainly, and there's nothing wrong with this, but it always creates this conflict with what we're actually feeling, our own direct feeling of the life that we're living, our own emotional habits, expectations, fears, anger, resentments, and confusion that we all experience emotionally. So recognize the intellect is one thing that has, we can be reasonable, we develop reason and logic and ideals. We make judgments, criticisms, comparing one thing with another. This is the function of our intellectual capacity. But emotionally, it's like this. And you can't, whatever emotions you're feeling at this moment, it's the way it is. You can't make yourself feel any particular way and sustain it. Because the emotions are, they're not the feeling of life, the sensitivity that we have to bear with, which we have no control over. We have to bear with the bodies that we have in their changing aspects, in their healthiness or sickness, their strength or weakness, their aging. And that, of course, is, ideal is to have a perfect body that is healthy and useful forever. And then the reality is it's like this. I have, now getting to the old age level, I have plenty of opportunity to recognize the realities of an aging 76-year-old human body is like this. Now that which is aware, that awareness is our ability to resolve the conflicts between the rational, critical faculties, the intellectual abilities that we've developed. And in a country like this, these are developed to a high degree. We are educated, we have so much information, knowledge, and ideas, and our intentions are usually good. We want the best for ourselves, families, the country, society. And we can conceive of ideal countries, governments, husbands, wives, partners, or whatever. But in any moment of our life, such as here and now, the feeling isn't an ideal. Your emotions are never ideals. They are the way they are. And so watching these emotions, beginning to get perspective on our emotional conditioning is very important to be the observer rather than the one that's always trying to control emotion, trying to either follow it, believe it, commit to our feelings, or to resist or reject or deny them. In a society like this one, there's a lot of problems with guilt. You have these people have a very strong, have these guilt complexes. And because we feel guilty about our basic primal emotions. Because coming from an ideal, of what we would conceive of as being what we would like to be is one thing, but the realities of our experience of life is not an ideal, it's the way it is, and it changes according to conditions. Like one would, in sense of danger, one would like to be brave. So the ideal is when you're facing danger, threats, and so you want to be brave. But then that's an ideal, but how do you really feel when you're in danger? Is like this, which may not possibly align itself with the word brave. And then we also recognize that our human condition also is one that we're born into a sense realm, such as this, being born into planet Earth, having to live on this planet in these forms, is meaning that we have to deal with the karma of being born as a human being, which means that when we're born, we have to deal with instinct, with fear is a kind of primal emotion. Fear is it's not personal even; it's primal. It comes with the package, and sexual desire. It comes with this is part of the package of being a human being, man or woman. Anger and resentment. These are all primal emotions. And yet in a lot of our guilt, in the sense of lack of self-respect, of seeing ourselves always in terms of our emotions as something wrong with them, or so we see them as maybe I shouldn't be angry, I shouldn't feel lust or fear, confusion. I should be brave and loyal and good and kind and compassionate. And then we feel guilty about the way we're actually feeling. And so, this is why I encourage you to really, get some perspective on the human condition as a human being. Is that greed, hatred, delusion, fear, these are part of the human karma of being born as a human being on this planet. Now the animal kingdom has these same emotions. So we're not that, on the level of this mammalian karma that we share, or just the karma of being born on planet Earth with all creatures that have forms, is that these emotions these feelings are a way of self-preservation, of procreation, survival. All these mechanisms are just part of having to live in a realm where there is a lot of danger. There's a lot to be frightened of when we look around. And it's so fear isn't some neurotic personal problem, but we begin to see it in terms of just a natural primal emotion that is part of our human condition. Or lust, sexual desire, or anger and resentment. Confusion, uncertainty, doubt. These are particularly common to human beings because we think a lot. We're called the thinking beings, and in the Pali word for human being, it's manusya, and this word mano, and I'm sure the English word man comes from Sanskrit or Pali, because it means a thinking being. And that describes us, isn't it? We think, and we have retentive memory, so we remember. Because we have this retentive memory, we can learn languages, complicated ways of expression, abstract ideas. We can remember, in our lives what happened 50 years ago, or, yesterday, or the day before, or last year. We have this ability to remember and conceive and create ideas and ideals in our minds. So this is particularly a gift that we have. It also can easily become a curse in our lives, because when it's not understood and not appreciated, not used properly, we tend to, like the guilt complexes that people have, is usually turning this sense of criticism inwardly. So you see all kinds of things that that you don't like or don't want in your mind, in your emotions, in your memories, in your thoughts. We can feel guilty about sexual desire, or feel guilty about hating or anger or greed. And so being a monk, I've noticed that in Thailand, for example, when the foreign monks started accumulating, some of them felt guilty about being hungry. So they felt, the idea, they get this idea that Buddhism is against desire and we've got to conquer desire. So they'd feel, they see that even hunger, physical, bodily hunger for food, is some kind of personal greed and defects. So I'm just pointing to how we can make everything too personal, take it in such a kind of diluted way and make it into something more than what it is. So many people suffer from guilt about all kinds of things, of not being perfect, of not being good enough, not being intelligent enough, not being whatever enough, because according to the ideal, of course, we have the ideals, but the realities are like this. The virtues, the vices, the habits, the tendencies, no matter how good, bad, virtuous, or not, we now have this opportunity to observe them for the way they are. And so this is what mindfulness allows us to do. So of course I'm always pointing to this word, mindfulness, awareness, sati sampajanya, sati panya. The Pali words, this sati sampajanya is about our ability to be aware in a broad way, of just being aware of existence, of contemplating, of reflecting on the nature of change, of feeling, our emotional feeling, pleasure or pain or neutral feeling, of the emotional conditions we experience, love or hate, happiness, suffering, our feeling of self-worth or lack of self-worth, we can observe. And so this is this ability, this escape hatch that the Buddha pointed to, that we began to emphasize. Like here at Amaravati, we emphasize this, because even though we all have this, it can be easily dismissed or overlooked by all the problems, concerns, and strong habits, strong emotions that we feel internally, and all the impingement and pressures and stress and demands from the society we live in. Now, putting this realm in a proper place, and again emphasizing this is a sense realm. The human body is a sensitive form. It's not a peaceful form. Having a human body is not about being peaceful. It's about, a lot of it's painful. And then we have illnesses and from childhood on up. I remember having measles, chicken pox, had rheumatic fever quite severely when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And, just childhood illnesses. So in childhood and from, infancy, we experience pain and discomfort, because this realm is about sensitivity. And this sensitive realm that we're in, how can it's so powerful, considering the temperature, the changing of the seasons, the climate, whether too hot, too cold, just right. Just the way things happen to be. Some people have very good health, and hardly ever experience sickness, and others are born with fairly weak constitutions, or experience all kinds of pains and physical discomfort that oneself might not experience. Some people are born, in very fortunate circumstances, other than very unfortunate ones. And so this is just, this realm is not a guarantee of making everything according to, fixing everything and making it right, but willingness to learn, to explore, to investigate. And this we can do. Every one of us here has this potential to do this. And what we learn from it is that we don't find, like the idea of nibbana, for example, is a word that's used a lot in modern parlance as a kind of blissful happiness, something that is beyond pleasure and pain into a state of permanent bliss. And that's what, we all like. That's why we start meditation. Remember, when I began meditating, I wanted to sideline all the pain and suffering, emotional problems I had, I hope to find a state of perpetual bliss and tranquility. And, of course, that's not what I found. I've had to learn that's, I've had moments like that, but you can't sustain them. They're not sustainable. They're not, we have peaks, we have experiences of great bliss and happiness and so forth that we, part of our experience, but it's not a sustainable state. Because the world we live in, the bodies we have, the planet that we live on is like this. It's not a blissful, it's not heaven, it's not Devaloka, it's not some high level of consciousness that can completely suppress and deny the existence of one's physical experience or emotional habits. So but the actual word nibbana or nirvana actually means discernment. Seeing clearly, being able to discern the way that one attaches out of habit, out of ignorance to conditions, and then the suffering is caused through this blind, ignorant attachment that is always creating a sense of dis-ease, no matter how convenient your life may be or how healthy you might be. Still, even in the healthiest, most convenient, most well-run society and happy family, there's still a level of uneasiness that is just a part of this conditioned realm that we can't just deny or get rid of through wealth or happiness in the world, but through understanding suffering. And just even a vague sense of dis-ease or dissatisfaction or, vague sense of anxiety, these might be just levels and maybe not of any great severity, but and then of course they can change. We can experience great emotional traumas, despair, disappointments, depression. But then in mindfulness practice, we're in a position to observe them. So this is our ability to pay attention to life as we're experiencing it, with whatever conditions we have to bear with, our karma, the way things are for us. And therefore, it's no good comparing yourself with somebody else. It's a waste of time to compare yourself with somebody else, because you'll just feel frustrated and disappointed, because that's not the way out of suffering. The way out of suffering is to learn from the way you are. And this is, so mindfulness allows us to recognize our own addictions to views, opinions, our identity with our body, with our cultural conditions, position in society, our sense of being male or female, our sexual inclinations, our whatever, all these things, these attachments and identities that we bind ourselves to, then of course lead to some form of dis-ease or disappointment or anxiety. Now what mindfulness does allow us to do is it's not a suppression, a denial, or rejection of conditioned phenomena. It's not bypassing the conditions. It's not critical or judgmental. It's not saying about whether they're how good or bad or right or wrong they might be. But mindfulness allows us to recognize ultimate reality, pure consciousness. Now, at this time, in the scientific world and the world of psychology, there's a tremendous interest in consciousness. And consciousness is very interesting, even though it's not very interesting, actually. Because once you recognize consciousness, there's nothing in it to be interested in. Just recognized. What we tend to be interested in is the things we project into consciousness, our sense of ourself, our views, our intellectual aspirations, hopes, or our sense of, the ego, the cultural attitudes, and our ideals, hopes, expectations from life. But consciousness itself, we don't need to look for it, because this is what we're experiencing right now. Everyone in this room is conscious. So, but then we don't discern consciousness, because the habit, out of ignorance, we tend to always be projecting things into it. So consciousness you might compare to like a movie screen. It's just blank. But on that blank screen, you project, you put in a film, and of course then you have all kinds of things, whether it's the trilogy of the rings, orcs or fantastic figures, or wars, or comedies, sitcoms, whatever, appear, and we get mesmerized into the feelings of love and hate and romance, adventure, excitement that are projected onto the screen. You wouldn't bother to go to a movie theater just to look at a blank screen. And that I hear in Zen Buddhism, Japanese Zen Buddhism, that's sometimes what they do. They just they practice looking at a blank wall. And there's a point to that. It's not interesting at all, blank walls. But it does. It does reflect this desire to find something to interest our minds, to find excitement, romance, adventure, or horror films, or be scared, or terror, or all these strong emotions are interesting. But pure consciousness is not. But it's recognizable. We begin to tune into it through mindfulness. We begin to have this insight, recognition of pure consciousness that has no personal quality to it. I can't claim it as my consciousness, as if my consciousness was any different from yours, or a dog's, or a cat, or a mosquito. Consciousness is like this. And then the forms, like consider the relationship of form to consciousness, like a dog has its own dog karma. So it has, when it's born, it has fear, it has sexual desire, it gets angry, jealous, just like we do. You can confuse dogs, cats, and so forth, just like we do. And so consciousness isn't like a consciousness for a dog is somehow a lower level of consciousness than for a human being. Or an arahant, say a totally perfected human individual, an arahant's consciousness, and a dog's inferior, and the arahant is superior. Then we're caught in this discrimination, our own maybe attitudes towards the animal kingdom. We're a superior species to the animal kingdom. The kind of arrogance that human beings sometimes manifest through our identity as being somehow above the animal level. And this is what I was taught when I was growing up, that we're superior to the animals, and that we can actually exploit animals because God created them for us to eat and whatever. And so this is my conditioning. So one never, you could kind of relate, if those who have pets oftentimes relate emotionally to them very well. You get very bonded, very attached to a dog or a cat, or some pet that you have that you find a sense of love or affection, interest, gives your life some meaning and quality that you wouldn't have if you didn't have the pet. And then there's the relationship with human beings. Fortunately, pets are easier to live with than human beings. And, how difficult it is to live with another human being. And so this is, because human beings think. And we don't always think the same, so this is, and we have all kinds of, you live in a monastic community, you've got so many people thinking in different ways. And so it becomes, conflicting in various ways of my view against your view. Not to mention, in marriages or relationships of various kinds, the conflict is part of the experience, the reality of relating to another human being in some, in real way, of learning how to listen and pay attention and not just operate from your own view blindly from what I think, and if you don't agree with me, you're wrong. Isn't it? We all learn as we mature how to listen to somebody else who we may not understand at all or even agree with. But it's not a matter of argument about who's right or wrong, but learning to pay attention to somebody else who's feeling maybe differently. It's like this. So this takes this discernment, this mindfulness, to be able to do this, because on a emotional level, one can build very strongly emotionally about my view is the right one. You've got it all wrong, and if you don't come to the right view, then bye bye. So yeah. So this is the problems that we have with each other. No matter how virtuous and good we are, we still conflict, or with parents, or our children with us, so we get frustrated or angry or confused by the fact that maybe our children don't agree or don't think or don't see things in the same way we do. Now, of course, being head monk at Amaravati, I think all the monks and nuns should see everything the way I do. And sometimes it's very frustrating because they don't. But then you learn that's the point of our life is not to find agreements on our own views, but to be able to reflect on them. Now this is very important, to reflect on what you do feel. It's not like this reflectiveness is a discerning ability in which we get perspective on our own conditioned views or cultural attitudes or emotional habits, tendencies, our own preferences or biases. We begin to see them in perspective. And this is not judgmental. We're not saying right or wrong, good or bad, but we're observing. And this emphasis that the Buddha made, this simple statement that all conditions are impermanent. So this simplifies everything for us. When we really explore this in our experience of life, that whatever you're feeling, thinking, your physical body, your sensory experiences through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, all this is about change and impermanency. And anything that's impermanent means it has a beginning and an end. It's not about something that stays forever. It's not about eternality. But it's observing this changing, whether it's a subtle change or coarse, refined, or whatever. Through awareness, we open ourselves to change the conditioned realm that we are experiencing very strongly at this very moment, sitting here and breathing in this sala. And so this mindfulness then allows us to be the observer of change rather than the person that's always caught up in the changing conditions you're experiencing. Now the judgmental mind, well, we create judgments and criticisms because that's the nature of the thought process. We have the ability through thinking to say, this is right, this is wrong, good, bad, this is high, this is low, coarse, refined. And these are kind of value judgments we place on conditions that we're experiencing or ideas that we have. Now the thinking process, not to dismiss it or see anything wrong with it, but learning how to think, how to use thought rather than be just a helpless victim of our thinking habits. Now when I first started meditation, I was about 30 years old, and I'd been through, the universities and acquired a lot of knowledge about all kinds of things, which I've forgotten now. And, and then, I just was an obsessed thinker. Just think all the time. And it would always and by the time you're 30, you get tired of your own thoughts because they get repetitious. When you're younger, you can have, you're kind of acquiring knowledge. You can be quite interesting. You have a good intellect, and it's quite entertaining and can be quite fascinating. But at least in my experience, by the age 30, I was really bored with my thoughts. And they kept repeating themselves over and over. So then starting meditation I started practicing meditation in 1966 in Bangkok. Became apparent that I thought if I could only stop thinking, everything would be all right. I had this insight. If I could only, somehow stop the flow of thoughts. So at first, how the idea of I've got to stop thinking, and you're trying to stop thinking, doesn't work, does it? So, so just kind of using willfulness that's based on self-view or, some kind of idea you had that you think too much and you shouldn't, and trying to stop it, I couldn't get any success with that one. But then as I developed awareness, ordained as a monk and so forth, then it became apparent just through observing, how to let go of thinking, not to suppress it or deny it or reject it, but to understand it, to see the limitation of it, the impermanence of thoughts, and be able to then through observing thinking, then you discern that which is aware of thinking is not thinking. As pure awareness, consciousness with awareness, mindfulness, and then wisdom, discerning it. Thinking is like this, non-thinking is like this. So recognize the discerning ability that we develop through wisdom is our ability to know the difference, to discern, like thinking, attachment to thought, and non-thinking. You can observe it in here. And so then you begin to recognize how to you don't stop thinking as like something you never think again, but your relationship to thinking then is much more one of developing thought in a useful, skillful way. How to use thought as because it's a great gift that we have, and a tool that is to be respected. But as an end in itself, it only goes from one thought to the next. It just carries you along into the thinking process, and then the judgments and criticisms and attitudes and cultural biases and personal preferences that we are blinded by, obstructed by. in the conflict, say, between the intellect and the emotions, and guilt, and sense of lack of worth, self-respect, and so forth. So many people in a country like this, no matter how virtuous or good or talented or educated they might be, there seems to be a kind of problem around lack of self-worth. And this is and this is, part of a cultural condition. Because we don't know who we are. And so we have ideas of what we should be, or how what we would like to be. And then we see our own sense of confusion as something wrong or we shouldn't have. Or our own kind of fears or anger, resentments, or greed, or whatever. We see it in terms of this is wrong. And so we tend to see, the sense of a self, we become very critical of ourselves. So we use the intellect sometimes to goes inward instead of always criticizing somebody else. Many of us turn it inward, and we always criticizing ourselves. So at least this was my tendency, was I wasn't so critical of others as of myself. Because I could see all kinds of things I didn't like about me. And I didn't want, I feel guilty or tendency to blame it on somebody. Was it my mother's fault, my father? Was it, something basically, I was born missing a few cells in my brain or something. Maybe I'm basically disabled person or whatever. It goes into any form of doubt or despair or attitudes, or no matter how much you try to see yourself in positive terms, the critical faculty is highly developed in a society like this one. Here in Britain, isn't it, in England, where people are very critical. It's part of our education, the way we see things, in terms of right and wrong and what should or shouldn't be. Then a lot of, then we have a Christian kind of cultural conditioning. Jewish or Christian, like in Europe or America, we, so many of us come from basically Christian or Jewish attitudes about how, according to the Old Testament or the New Testament. And so we have this conditioning which tends to see ourselves in terms of maybe sinners or something wrong, or that we have to always do something to try to become something better. We're not good enough. We need to improve ourselves endlessly. Like in the States, I don't know how strong it is here in England, but Americans are really hung up on self-improvement. So they have books, in bookshops, just how to improve yourself. Because, you're really, none of you are good enough the way you are. You could always be better. And so this is, because we see ourselves from the critical mind. Now, not to dismiss the value of learning how to do things better or improve in these kind of ways, but also it tends to create this sense of there's something, I'm not good enough the way I am, and I've got to prove myself or get something I don't have, or I've got to get rid of what I have which is inferior or inadequate. So then we do suffer a lot from guilt, because no matter how hard we try to improve ourselves, even though we can make ourselves kind of better person, a better personality, maybe a more accepting, generous, kind person. The problem is really rooted in the early conditioning of seeing ourselves always from being born in a state of sin or in not being good enough, or you're in a competitive society. There's always this sense of, you having to compete with somebody else, and that you're inferior if you don't, if you're not a winner, then you're not as good as the one who is a winner. And you can see that in the world of tennis or golf, football, whatnot. How much this momentum towards achievement and winning and proving ourselves better than somebody else, or our team, or our country, our culture, our religion, or whatever is somehow superior to somebody else's. And so our sense of self-respect depends on so much of achievement, of wanting to become somebody that other people envy or admire, be recognized, respected in various ways by others. Or we can, out of despair, just give up, become a tramp or something, alcoholic or anything. It's just way so tired of playing the game, I'm just going to think I'll spend the rest of my life drunk, which I've certainly felt when I was a layman. At least, it doesn't take any effort, just the effort to lift a glass of liquor. But where the other is continuous, kind of, isn't it? You're always having to, through your life, just always compete or feel the necessity to compete or compare with somebody else. Now with mindfulness, we begin to see these that's not saying it's wrong, but that we see the suffering we create by blindly being caught into these conditions. Because these are conditions. They're not ultimate reality. They're illusions that we grasp and don't have a perspective on. We don't see them in terms of impermanent conditions and non-self. We always see them in somehow we give them a sense of permanency in our mind. Always, when we fail, don't we? When we fail at something, we can easily go into, I'll always be I'm just a failure, and sink into despair around the fact that we failed the exam or didn't get the job or whatever. Or we can always see it as a challenge. If I don't win this time, I'm going to win the next one. We all have various individual ways of dealing with the conditioned realm and the karma that we have. But this mindfulness then gives us this sense of tuning into what I call the amatta dhamma, or deathless, ultimate reality, pure consciousness. The Buddha's teachings all about discerning and investigating till we actually find in ourselves a stillness, a peacefulness that's always with us, but we don't recognize it. We don't know it because we're always caught into this vortex of changing conditions and habitual tendencies. And so this is why the importance of, like meditation. It gives a chance to kind of just stop running around reinforcing the sense of yourself with the conditioned realm, with the conditions you have, but a sense of stopping and looking, observing, listening, reflecting. And this I found, this ability to suddenly just stop this obsessive movement of habit that one acquires by observing it, not by trying to improve myself by getting rid of it. So it's not about getting rid of or judging, it's discerning. It's like this. So this is a time where, with the problems of our life, personal problems, environmental problems, cultural, national problems, that they seem to be endless. Overpopulation, environmental destruction, pollution, and all the possible dangers and threats that we can conceive of, both on the planet and then the possibility of alien invasions from Mars and meteorites crashing into the Earth and so forth, that we live in a realm of danger, actually. Planet Earth isn't so solid and fixed as we would like to assume. Just thinking, the very center of this, you're sitting on the surface of this planet, and the very center is all about heat and fire, molten heat, and just contemplate that for a while, and you and changing, earthquakes and different things, plates changing position. And I was from the West Coast of the United States, from Seattle, and there we always had earthquakes to deal with, because it's right on this fault line. It goes from North America down the coast to New Zealand, of these plates that change. And in Seattle, I remember, we had earthquakes quite regularly, not any that severe, but even when they're not very severe, they're terrifying. Because, what do? You can't find any place to run to because everything's quaking. And that's scary, isn't it? At least, if somebody else is shooting at you, you can duck or shoot back. But when an earthquake takes over, you're helpless. But this also is a warning to us, isn't it? These kind of events like flood, natural catastrophes, tsunamis, earthquakes, and so forth, they're actually warning us that this realm, this planet, this universe is not to be seen as something that you can actually depend on for finding peace and happiness. That this is an opportunity we have to learn to develop this wisdom. And this is our great gift of being human. And in Buddhist terms, this is a very fortunate birth, to have a human birth. And contemplate this, because we have this ability within a world of conflicts and fear and changing conditions we have hardly any control over whatsoever. We have this ability to recognize a stillness, an inner peace, stillness, that is our true nature, that is with us all the time, but when we don't observe it, we don't see it, don't discern it, then we're caught into what they call samsara, this changing vortex, this whirling vortex of change, and the realm of conditionality that we can't control. We can't make it what we want. We can't demand that it be a certain way for us, because it's just the way it is. Change, conditions, the bodies we have, the emotional habits that we've acquired, our own sense of self, and fears, desires of different kinds, they are the way they are. And then mindfulness gives us perspective. Now this really is something to recognize, something worth doing, because with this kind of practice you can resolve conflicts in your mind. You can actually go to pure awareness. And as you recognize it, it's self-sustaining. You don't need to make it happen or control it. The attitude is more of letting go of control, of attachments. And through that, then you discern what we call the unborn, uncreated, the deathless, the ultimate reality. This we can actually recognize through mindfulness. And from there, then the conflicts we have personally, our emotional habits, our sense of our self-worth and so forth, these then are in a perspective that we're no longer just helplessly deluded, overwhelmed, and caught into the power of conditioned phenomena. Now this is kind of a miracle in a way, when, from my perspective as a personality, I think this is a marvelous, fantastic ability that through the power of, through the powerful conditions that one has to endure for a lifetime, your own human form, for example, and all the pressures of the universe, the alignment of the stars in the sky, everything's affecting us, isn't it, in some way? How can you control the power of the moon or the sun or when we try, kind of megalomaniacs, trying to become God, but nobody ever succeeds. So we have to, it's all a kind of terrible disappointment, because we have to recognize the limitation of our humanity. We can't become God and know everything and be in control of the whole universe, but we can observe this within this form, in this human form, and with the karma that you have individually. Whatever it might be, physically, healthy or sickly, whatever your emotional habits might be, or your neuroses or fears or whatever, your opinions and views and attitudes, these are all reflected in, like on this movie screen, they're like the film being played. But you can also, when the movie stops, there's the screen. And so mindfulness gives us this sense of recognizing this pure consciousness, which we don't create. It's not cultural. It's not personal. It's not even Buddhist. But it is reality. And therefore, it helps to put into perspective our own, our ego's sense of self, our conditioning that we've acquired after we're born. The strong sense of me and mine, or cultural prejudices or biases, fears and desires, of our arrogance, our conceit, our sense of anxiety and worry about the future, or regret or angst that we create around past experience, remembering things of the past, or the resentments that we feel about being treated unfairly or abused, and that we remember in our past. We have a perspective on these conditions in which we're not denying or indulging in, but we observe them. And as you cultivate this, then you really begin to trust this. This is something you can totally trust and cultivate in your life in the way that you have to live it. In the conditions that we find ourselves in. So now, I invite you to have a cup of tea, and then in 20 minutes or so, if you're interested, then we can have a discussion.